We humans have a lot to worry about these days: climate change, another pandemic, even the threat of World War III. But the unregulated development of artificial intelligence might be as potent a threat as any, according to my next guest, retired Admiral James Stavridis. He was NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Europe and is now Vice Chair of Global Affairs at the Carlyle Group. His fascinating new book, 2054 novel, which he co-wrote with Elliot Ackerman, very talented writer, is centered on the existential threat AI poses for the future of the world. Jim, pleasure to have you on. Fascinating how you're writing these series of books. And this one is really about the AI race in military affairs. So first I want to ask you, explain to us the power of AI. So you're a naval commander. What would AI allow you to do as a naval commander that you weren't able to do when you were actually commanding ships?
Let me give you three very practical things. Number one, and it doesn't sound sexy, but it's logistics and maintenance. Artificial intelligence has the capability to predict when a particular set of maintenance functions are needed, make sure that the spare parts are in train, all of that done in a way that is much more efficient, much more capable.
But that's huge because it keeps the ships in permanent readiness. Right?
Absolutely. We always say in the military, the amateurs are the ones talking about strategy. The professionals are focused on logistics. That's what wins wars. But number two, artificial intelligence will allow a commander, say I was the captain of a destroyer, which I was, if I had an AI advising me, plugged into my decision process, that AI would have access to every naval battle ever fought. It would be capable of scanning the horizon of history and whispering into the commander, you really ought to think about this. And then third and finally, and we're seeing the edges of this in Ukraine, drones, swarms, bringing them together in very lethal ways. Currently can't quite do that. Artificial intelligence will make swarming drones the greatest threat by mid-century.
You talk a lot about the AI race, and it's really US versus China.
Yes.
Who's ahead?
US marginally ahead. Our mutual friend Eric Schmidt did a marvelous set of research on this a couple of years ago, and he would have said then, we're about a year ahead of China. My sense from my sources, China is closing that gap. This is the foot race that will determine geopolitical superiority by mid-century.
Are we building the right kind of military for that kind of world?
Absolutely. And let me add another example in terms of drones versus naval. Look what's happening in the Black Sea. The Russian Black Sea fleet, a third of it is on the bottom of the Black Sea, drinking seawater, as we would say in the business. Why? Not because Ukraine has a navy. They don't. It's because the Ukrainians have used both air and surface drones. So to your question...
And those drones are amazing. The minister showed them to me. They look like toy boats, and they're really highly lethal drones that can sink these hundreds of millions of dollars worth of warships.
Correct. And so the question then becomes, are the carriers still viable? I think they are for the moment, for the 10-year future, 15-year future. Boy, you get much beyond that, and the capacity of massive swarms of drones accompanied by cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, all linked together by artificial intelligence. It'll make those crown jewels of the fleet, our aircraft carriers, vulnerable.
So you've held very, very high military office, and you know that there are some people who worry that Donald Trump, were he to be elected again, would politicize the military. Do you worry about that?
I do. And I think that the greatest aspect of our national security is an apolitical military. And we would edge in to politics, into that force, at great peril to the republic. At the moment, all of my contacts in the active duty military reassure me that the military continues to regard itself as apolitical and followers of the Constitution. Let's hope it stays that way.
And when you look at NATO, you were the former Supreme Allied Commander. Great, great title, by the way. There are people in Europe who worry a lot about Trump and NATO. And what I've heard people say is he doesn't have to pull out of NATO. He just has to say, I'm not going to defend Latvia, Lithuania.
Estonia.
Right, because it's a sort of, in some ways, the whole NATO is basically, it's a psychological game. The threat is psychological, that the US will get involved. That's what Putin has to be calculating. And if the president says something like that, the building can continue, the meetings can continue, but the heart of it is lost.
We always say deterrence is the combination of capability and credibility. NATO is incredibly capable. The defense budget of the United States and the Europeans together is well over 10 times that of Russia. The population is well over 5 times the size of Russia. So the capability is not the problem. You've put your finger on it. It's the credibility. And yes, I would be very concerned about a Trump presidency that did not actively support and indeed lead within NATO. That's a real concern.
From the former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO.
My pleasure, Fareed.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next on GPS, we delve into the world of espionage with the CIA's former chief of disguise, Jana Mendes. I'll ask her about her adventures in the spy trade when we come back.